You didn't realize it was happening. That's the point. Emotional manipulation doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with red flags and warning signs and obvious cruelty. It arrives with warmth, with understanding, with someone who seems to see you more clearly than anyone ever has. And by the time you understand what happened, you've already been changed by it. Most people think emotional manipulation looks like obvious control, an angry partner who shouts, a cruel person who insults, someone whose behavior is clearly and immediately wrong. And they tell themselves, I would see that. I would leave. I'm too smart for that. But research tells a completely different story. Psychologist George Simon, who spent decades studying manipulative personalities, found that the most effective emotional manipulation is almost always invisible. It doesn't look like control. It looks like love. It looks like concern. It looks like the other person caring so deeply about you that they need to be involved in every part of your life. The myth is that manipulation is obvious. The truth is that by design, it never is. Emotional manipulation in relationships almost always follows the same pattern. It begins with something that feels extraordinary. Psychologists call this idealization, the phase where everything about you is perfect, fascinating, and irreplaceable to the other person. They make you feel more seen, more understood, more valued than you have ever felt. Your brain releases dopamine and oxytocin in response to this attention, the same chemicals behind deep attachment and addiction. And then, slowly, gradually, in ways too small to point to individually, it begins to shift. The warmth becomes conditional. The praise becomes qualified. The person who once made you feel like the most important person in their world starts making you feel like you have to earn that feeling back again. And because you remember how good it felt, because your brain is chemically attached to the version of this relationship that existed in the beginning, you try. And the trying is exactly what they were waiting for. Here is what emotional manipulation actually looks like inside a real relationship. Guilt as a weapon. Not obvious guilt, subtle guilt. The kind that makes you apologize before you've even finished expressing a need. The kind that makes you feel responsible for their emotions while your own go unaddressed. Moving the goalposts. The rules keep changing. What was fine yesterday is a problem today. What they asked for last week is now what you're being criticized for giving. You can never quite get it right, and that feeling of never quite getting it right keeps you trying. Minimizing your reality. Your feelings are too sensitive. Your memory of events is conveniently wrong. Your reaction to their behavior is the real problem. Over time, you stop trusting your own perception. You start running everything through their filter before deciding how to feel about it. And isolation. Always isolation. Not dramatic, all at once. Slowly. A comment about a friend. A suggestion about your family. A gradual narrowing of your world until the person manipulating you is the only person left in it. Psychologist Judith Herman, whose research on psychological trauma is among the most important in the field, identified what prolonged emotional manipulation does to the human mind. It doesn't just hurt feelings. It restructures them. Victims of sustained emotional manipulation show measurably reduced activity in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for rational decision-making and self-assessment. They experience hypervigilance, a state of constant alertness to the other person's mood, always scanning for signs of what's coming. They develop what psychologists call a corrupted internal compass, an inability to trust their own judgment about what is normal, what is acceptable, what they deserve, and perhaps most painfully, they often feel responsible for what was done to them, not because they are, but because the manipulation was specifically designed to make them feel that way. Here is what emotional manipulation ultimately is. Beneath all the tactics, beneath all the psychology, beneath all the research, it is the systematic dismantling of another person's reality so that they become dependent on the manipulator to tell them what is true. It is not passion. It is not intensity. It is not complicated love or a difficult personality or someone who just needs to be understood better. It is the deliberate erosion of someone's ability to trust themselves. And the reason it works, the reason intelligent, perceptive, emotionally aware people find themselves inside it, is because it begins before you know what you're inside of. By the time the pattern is clear enough to name, the damage has already been done, and undoing that damage, Rebuilding the ability to trust your own perception, your own memory, your own emotional reality is work that takes time, support, and deliberate effort. But it is possible, because the self that was dismantled was never actually destroyed. It was just buried under someone else's version of who you were. If you recognize something in this video, in the warmth that came first, in the guilt that followed, in the slow confusion about what was real, that recognition matters, not because it changes what happened, but because awareness is the beginning of the only thing that actually does. You are not too sensitive. You are not too much. You did not imagine it. You did not deserve it. You were targeted by someone who understood exactly how to make you feel like all of those things were true. And now you know something they were counting on you never figuring out. Share this with someone who is still trying to understand what happened to them. It might be the most important thing they watch this year. Subscribe to Mind Patterns, because the truth about what people do to each other and why is the beginning of protection.